Yo, what's up, comrades? Here we go. 2 more seasons. Season number 5. This season gets a little more fun. From what I remember with like Highlander magic, or I guess it's just like Immortals magic and whatnot. And we get introduced to Cassandra, who can like who's an immortal, who can foresee the future. But she's like, it's like the sketchy kind of seeing the future where you get like glimpses of things and everything's like poems and riddles and bullshit like that. And then there's Kantos, who was a former pupil of Cassandra, who can like Jedi mindfuck people. Like he can like, what the fuck is this guy doing? He can, sorry, I'm driving on the freeway and some dude just like did some crazy shit. Anyway, so Kantos can kind of, Jedi, he does the Jedi thing where he's like, there are no droids here or whatever. He'll be like, you want to listen to me and throw yourself off this cliff. And people are like, yes, my lord. And so he's kind of sketchy as fuck. Anyway, so we spent a lot of time seeing Duncan as a child in like 1600 Scotland, where he like was out with his buddies and they got lost in the woods, and then he ends up at like the witch's house, who the witch is Cassandra, and then she like she sees like a fortune of him and foretells he's going to defeat light with dark, or darkness with light or something. I can't remember exactly what it says, but there's like a whole thing, a prophecy, and it seems like the prophecy is predicting the death of Kantos. I don't know why it gets told to him or like whatever. Kantos somehow figures it out and is like hunting Duncan down because he wants to kill Duncan while he's like a child so that he doesn't have to fight him later on and get killed by him because of the prophecy or some bullshit like that. And so he's like going around, fucking around, trying to find Duncan, and then and hunting Cassandra down. And then Cassandra like finds Duncan and like warns him that Kantos is here, and Duncan's like, hell yeah, fuck that guy, because Kantos like fucked around with like his tribe at one point when he was like a little kid or something, and he's like tired of that shit. Anyway, so that's the episode. We spent a lot of time in like the flashbacks of him being a kid, like learning from Cassandra, talking about being an immortal and stuff, and then she like causes him to like forget or something, and then we get a pretty good fight with him and Kantos, where Kantos uses his like Jedi mind trick, but then Duncan's able to like resist it at the last second and kind of overcome, so that he's able to defeat Kantos and kill him, and then him and Cassandra like fuck. Which is always a great way to start a season of Highlander, as far as I'm concerned. It's a great way to start a season of anything. And that wraps up episode 1. Episode 2 of season 5 here. We bring Richie Ryan back. Yay, Richie Ryan's back. What's he doing? Well, after Mac almost killed him, then he's kind of gone on a little like teenage rebellion spree, you gotta say. Like, he's just going around being an asshole. We literally see him going to a guy. God, I was kind of confused. It seemed like he sold his bike to a guy because the transmission didn't work, and then the guy fixed the transmission, and then Richie came back to like buy the bike for the same price, and the guy's like, no, you got to pay for the transmission fixing. And then Richie like poured gasoline all over the bike and then pulled out a lighter. The guy's like, fine, just take the fucking bike, you lunatic. And so he does. And then he's just like going around fighting immortals and killing dudes and just being like, he's having like nightmares and some PTSD stuff going on for when Duncan like tried to kill him when he was like possessed by like the bad gathering, or not the bad gathering, the bad quickening, the evil quickening or whatever. Oh, good stuff. Anyway, we also spent a lot of time with Joe and Duncan going back and forth about Duncan's still butthurt about his buddy who got killed and the whole thing at the end of the last season. Right? And so he's like, we can't be friends anymore. You're a watcher. You need a dedicated watcher. As long as you have that, we can't be friends. And then Joe takes it to like, he's like, then he gets pouty. And then Richie kills a guy who happens to have like, his like best friend is this other guy, Haysham Clay. And Haysham Clay is like a super good fighter. He's not as good as Duncan, obviously, because there's like a whole season of this left, obviously. But but back in the day, Duncan was being like trained by this guy, Graham Lay or something like that. Anyway, Graham is part of the name. And he was like the best sword fighter Duncan had ever seen in his entire life. And Haysham rolls up and is like, I'm here for you. Let us fight, motherfucker. And then Haysham Clay is like, Duncan, go hide in the holy ground over there. And so then they fight, and right before Haysham's about to kill Graham like begs for his life. And then Haysham's like, haha, go fuck yourself, and like cuts off his head. And then he taunts Duncan and like swings at him while he's in holy ground. Duncan like freaks out and like pees his pants or whatever. And then the Haysham's like, you dumb motherfucker, you're such a bitch. And then he like talks to the guy who Richie killed in the future, who I guess they've been together for like 900 years, is like lovers, is my only assumption. I mean, the show came out in the 90s, so they weren't going to say it, but it's like, he says, have you ever had a friend? I was friends with him. He was my squire. We were partners for 900 years, longer than you've been alive. You can't understand what that's like to lose someone like that. And I'm like, oh, they were fucking. I get it now. Okay, that's cool. So I guess this is the first canon gay immortals. Anyway, the other fun thing that happens in this episode is that they've referenced the Kurgan and Ramirez. You remember them, right? Like, let's go back, like, I don't even know, 3 months ago when I posted my video about Highlander, the movie, the original one. Yeah, Ramirez, old Sean Connery, the Spaniard. His British accent. And the Kurgan, the crazy guy who liked to fuck the prostitutes. They reference him, so the canon in this series is like all over the fucking place, but whatever. So that was fun. I don't think they've ever referenced the first movie outside of like the first episode and like maybe a couple other references to like Connor McLeod, but never like I don't think they ever call him Connor most of the time when they refer to him. They just refer to him as like the other guy in his clan who like also had like a legend around him. Like they're really trying to hard to distance it, and I guess now they're not. They're coming back. They're circling back. So, that's fun. Okay, yeah, so then Richie and Duncan tries to go, like, make amends with Richie after he finds that information, and then Richie's being a little bitch, and then Haysham tries to track down Richie and breaks his sword, and so then Joe tells him about that, tells Duncan about that, and then Duncan goes and gives him another sword, and Richie and him, like, they're keeping at odds, and so both of them separately are trying to track down Haysham to fight him, because Duncan wants, like, revenge for his honor, and then Richie just wants to not be, like, not to like feel like he needs his daddy around anymore. And they have some pretty good man-to-man talks about like Duncan's like, I'm not your dad, I'm not your whatever, I'm just a friend. And Richie's like, okay, I guess that's okay. Anyway, so then they finally track this guy down. He's at a grave, like mourning his friend, and they're like, all right, time to die, motherfucker. And the guy's like, all right, let's go do this. It's kind of fucked up. Like, just let him mourn, like, come back tomorrow. But I give more leniency somewhat to Duncan in this regard, because if he doesn't go fight this guy now, Richie's going to go get killed. And, like, he wants his friend to be alive a little bit longer, right? And that's, we see the theme with, like, Haysham and his little gay friend between Richie and Duncan, even though they're not gay for each other, because Duncan definitely likes fucking whores, or not fucking bitches, I should say. And so does Richie. Anyway, so then Duncan and him fight, and then Duncan wins, and then he gets the gathering, or the quickening. And then they meet up at Joe's bar a little bit later. And, at some point in the episode, Joe's like, aha, look, I got the tattoo removed, so I'm not a watcher anymore because I choose to be your friend more so. And Duncan's like, oh, man, that's great. And then, and the reason I bring this up, I bring this up because I was like, wow, so he's not a watcher anymore. That's totally crazy. And at the end, they're sitting around, and Richie's like, God, I can't, Duncan told me, or like Mac told me you weren't a watcher anymore, but I didn't believe it. And then he's like, yep. And then Duncan's like, maybe you should go back. And Joe's like, the fuck, bro? And he's like, nah, man. Like, we don't need pencil pushers documenting the immortals and our histories and everything. We need, like, someone who actually cares and wants to be involved and whatnot. And then Joe's like, what about us being friends? And Duncan's like, we'll make it work. Don't worry about it. And I was like, fuck you, Duncan McLeod. The fuck, man? Dude, this season's full of stars. We got Carl back. Carl Robinson. You remember Carl Robinson? You probably don't. He was a slave that Duncan rescued many moons ago, obviously, when slavery existed in the United States. He was in that racially charged issue or episode where a lot of the nigger was thrown around between him and the Italian guy who's half black. And they... so... What was his name? Gosh. Anyway, I'm not binge watching these, so I can't remember off the top of my head. But you know what I'm talking about. The guy who went and joined like the Bosnian Civil War or whatever nonsense he was fucking doing. And then there was like an assassination attempt on that other guy who was like a Marine with Joe in the previous season. God, what's his fucking name? It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, not important right now. So Carl, he is like a baseball star. I guess he's like striking out Ken Griffey Jr. or something. I can't remember what they said. I'm not a baseball person. But he has got this guy who's Trey, who's like his coach in like the minor leagues. or something. He's like signing autographs and stuff, and then he gets like the presents. And so he sees this blonde, long-haired, blonde, immortal guy standing up on like the roof of the stadium, or whatever it's called in baseball. And so he goes up there and he's like, "What do you want?" And the guy's like, "You know what I want. I'm here for killing you." He's like pulling a Richie Ryan from the previous episode. And then he's like, "Nah, man, I don't want to fight here, and I don't want to fight you, so just get the fuck out of here. I'm not for this bullshit." And he's like, "You will fight." And he pulls out his sword, and Carl's like, "God damn." So he fights, and then Carl like kills him, but like the guy's head and his body fall off the stadium, like where everyone, like people can see. And they see him standing there after he gets like the quickening, and he's like, "Fuck." And so he runs off to hide, and he sends a message to McLeod. And then we get like a quick little flashback of like this. We get like a recap of like when Duncan's crashed into like his lynching pole or whatever and saved his life back in the day, and kind of rescued him and how they became like bosom companions. And so then this kid shows up at Duncan's place, and there's this random hot chick, like Eastern European, I want to say, or like something, with a nice rack, who shows up and is like, "Oh, I'm here to like refix your gym and something, something, something." And then she shows up again later in the episode, and I was like, "Who the fuck is this lady?" And both times Duncan's like, "Yeah, I'll talk to you later." And I'm like, "Who the fuck is this?" Like, why is she here? It's like the producer's daughter or something. Damn, it's stupid. I don't know, maybe she'll come somewhere. Anyway, so this little kid like shows up, gives Duncan like a note. He goes and tracks down Carl, who's hanging out in some shady hotel, and he's like, "Man, bad things have happened." And Duncan's like, "Yeah, you're over the fucking news, bro. We like killed this guy." And then there's like, "Come stay with me, it'll be okay." So they head over to Duncan's place, and then they see another immortal, who's this guy who is like renowned for hunting down serial killers, and it's McCormack, and or is it just Cormac? It might just be Cormac. I'm just gonna go with that. So Cormac, and then Carl's like, "Whoa, fuck, let's get out of here." So they go to Joe's place, and Duncan introduces him to Joe, and then I'm gonna go talk to Cormac. So he goes to talk to Cormac, who's just hanging out at the gym, and he's like, "Hey man, what's your beef with Carl? Like, you know, he fought like an immortal battle and killed a guy. Like, why are you being such an asshole?" And he's like, "Let me tell you about Carl, our buddy Carl." And so then we get like so then we, between a couple flashbacks and discussions, we find out that so Carl was like a slave. I know I said that already, but he was like an actual slave working on a plantation, and he like ran away and he got shot in the back, and he woke up and he was alive, and he meandered about and got captured by some assholes, and then McCormick found him and like bought him, and then the guy, he pulls out a sword, and Carl's like freaking out, and then he cuts the chains and is like, "Come on." So he teaches him how to fight and all this stuff, and then after a while, it's like the Civil War is going poorly for the South, so then Cormac's like, you should head north. Like, you don't need to be pulled into all this crazy bullshit down here and whatnot. And he's like, "Yeah, I got something to take care of first." And then Cormac's like, "What are you going to do?" And we find out that Cormac, I think he was married. He was married. At the time, he might have just been engaged to the slave owner who owned Carl's, like his daughter. Right. So he's like, "Don't go causing any problems. Just go north. Like, we don't worry about mortal affairs. Like, mortal affairs aren't our business anymore. We're immortal, blah, blah, blah." And then Carl's like, yeah, got it. And so he goes and like fights with the guy anyway, and then ends up killing him by accident. And then the sun comes out, and so he kills him too. And so Cormac like swore like an oath to like hunt him down. And so now like 200 years later ish, or that Civil War wasn't that long ago. It's like 1800. So this show came out, and like I think this season was like 96 or something. So it's like 130 years later. Anyway, so now he wants to get him, not for fighting an immortal, but because now he can finally get him. And so then Duncan confronts him, and they get into like a fight, and so Carl like storms off because he's got a real hard temper. He's like lucky he's still alive, to be completely honest. And the police get him, and they track him down, and they take him to jail. And then Duncan goes to like talk to Cormac again. It's like, "This is ridiculous, like putting him in jail. They're gonna find out about us and all this stuff." And then Cormac's like, "He's not gonna make it. Don't worry about it." Wink, wink. And Duncan's like, "Man, this is stupid bullshit. Like, what's your guys' beef? Like, you're a good guy. He's a good guy. Stop being an asshole." And then Cormac's like, "Well, it's not a big problem because someone else confessed, and it's Trey. It's Trey's the coach guy. He came out and said that he did it." And so then Carl's free, and he's like pretty psyched about the whole situation. And Duncan like reads him the rights, as in like, "Hey man, you're better than this. Like, you're making this guy a slave essentially." And they go back and forth about Reese Moose and all that bullshit. And finally Carl like agrees to go visit Trey, and they go talk to Trey, and Trey's like, "Why did you do it, man? You know you didn't do it." And he's like, "Man, you're of value. I have no value." And it's like real sad. Like this Trey guy, like, it's like, man, I feel bad for this like fake person. Like, he's on like a real hard time in life, and he's not enjoying it too much. And so that's real sad-opotamus. What's going on here? I'm trying to avoid. Okay, it looks like it's, yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm driving on the freeway. I think I mentioned that before in this video. But there was like some accident, and I was like, hell no. So I got off and like snuck around the countryside of like Alabama for a little bit. Now I'm getting back on. Okay, so we're good. I totally dodged out of that bullshit. That would have been like another hour in my fucking trip. Okay. Ooh, it shaved off like 10 minutes according to Google. Nice. So Trey is like, you're valuable. You add to the world. Losing me is not taking away from the world. Like this is how it needs to be. Like this is better for like society and mankind and all that bullshit. And then Carl's like at the baseball stadium like hitting balls, and Duncan's like, feels great, doesn't it? And Carl's like, man, shut the fuck up. What am I supposed to do? And he's like, dude, just go and confess or whatever, man, and just deal with it. And he's like, fuck you, man, fine. And so so they're chit-chatting about it, and then Cormac shows up, and he's like, all right, let's do this, motherfucker. And then Carl's like, all right, let's do this. And Duncan's like yelling at them both, like, you guys need to stop fighting, stop being bitches. Like, we can all be friends, we can all hold hands and kumbaya, like, fuck the quickening or the gathering or whatever. And then Carl's like, hey, man, don't listen to this dumb bitch. But listen to me. Like, Trey didn't do it, so if you win, please, get him off. Like, you know, be it was me, something, just make sure Trey doesn't get thrown in jail or whatever. And then Duncan's like, see, he's not an asshole. Like, you're mad at him because he got involved with mortal affairs, and now you're still holding on like 130 years to like mortal affairs, and we're all immortals, and we should be like kumbaya around the fucking fire and all this stuff. And finally Cormac, the actor who plays Carl, or I guess I should say Carl, he does a fucking fantastic job in this episode. He's always great. Like, when he showed up in this episode, I was like, hell yeah, it's gonna be another banger, because he is excellent. I don't know what else in the world he was possibly in, but he's great. He's a fucking fantastic actor. And so he convinces me and Cormac that his sincerity of wanting to help like Trey and tell him that he's like his life's of value, and make sure that he's like not sad eponymous or whatever. And so Cormac finally like gets one over. So then between the three immortals, they come up with this like scheme where Carl's gonna, he found Duncan essentially finds the sword, quote unquote finds the sword that Carl used to kill the guy, brings it in as evidence. They go hunt down, and then they threaten Duncan to show them where Carl is, and then Carl like comes out with a shotgun and tries to fight the police, so he dies. And then they sneak Carl out of the morgue, as they do, and then like Cormac's gonna like cover up for him, and they're gonna head out of there. And so it's like all sweet and cute, and then Carl's like talking a lot of shit, and then Duncan's like, he looks over at Cormac and is like, man, maybe you should have taken his life after all. Such a bro episode. I loved it. Oh, this is so good. It's the best episode of the season thus far. The first two are alright, but this episode was baller. And then it ends with Trey just like standing by himself in the stadium, like throwing balls. And Carl comes over with Duncan, and he's like, "Hey man, don't ask questions. Consume product. Don't ask questions. No, don't worry. Like, I'm alive. Don't ask questions. Just know that like I really appreciate it. Like, you've done a lot for me in my life." And then they like jibber jabber about throwing fastballs and stuff. And then Trey gets like a tearful smile, and Carl gets a tearful smile, and Duncan's very smug. And then and Carl leaves, and that ends the episode, which is fucking great. Now, episode 4 is a little less great than the previous episode. It's a Joe-heavy episode, which would be fine, but the Duncan stuff is like... it is... What's the English term? It's like a strange juxtaposition, maybe? Is the word I'm looking for? So this episode is kind of like hilarious hijinks between Duncan and like some immortal he knew from like back in like the Roaring 20s. While also having a fucking telenovela starring Joe and the lady from his high school girlfriend. So I can talk about these episodes. It's like 2 episodes. That's in my head. It's like I can talk about these stories without referencing the other story almost at all, because they are completely irrelevant to each other, which is like weird to have them in the same. Like, there's literally one moment in this episode where Joe is like being a little bitch boy and like pouring his heart out to Duncan, while Duncan's like crafting a doll, like a human-sized doll, to like play Coyote and Roadrunner with another immortal, to trick him into like pretend assassinating the fake Duncan, so that he can go and like fight him for realsies, because the guy has like never killed an immortal before and like doesn't want to, so he uses like all like the tricks in the book that you're not supposed to use because of honor. It's like wackadoo on that level. It's like a fucking Speedy Gonzalez episode. Anyway, so I guess we'll talk about that first. So Duncan is just like hanging out at like a storage facility for Joe, doing some bullshit because he needs to like get some tools to fix like a beer tap at his bar. And then he comes out and he runs into Johnny K. It's Johnny K. Who the fuck's Johnny K? So we go back to like, I don't know, the 20s, sure. And Johnny K is some like little mook that is an immortal that Duncan knows, and he's kind of keeping an eye on him to make sure that like when he transforms over, he has somebody to like help him out. But the kid's like a real asshole, and so he witnesses outside of like an illegal poker game. He sees like a drive-by shooting, and he knows that it was done by like, I don't know, Italian guy, like one of my cousins. And Duncan is like, hey man, you should tell the police what happened. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not no stool pigeon. I'm going to go get in good with these guys so I can work my way up. And Duncan's like, you probably shouldn't do that. You got like a bright future ahead of you, because Duncan knows he's an immortal. So how about you just like ignore that shit and just move on today? And he's like, nah, I'm Johnny K. So Johnny K goes to like this guy's mafia place and is like, yo, I saw you kill that guy. I want to join your team. And so the mafia guy does the most logical thing ever and just kills Johnny K in like his warehouse and so like dump the body. Duncan then senses that he is like awoken as an immortal and goes and tries to like reveal to him that he needs to do immortal stuff and learn to fight and put all these like petty grievances aside. And so Johnny K decides he's not going to do that he's going to focus purely on petty grievances and like amassing wealth through being like an assassin. In fact, the episode even begins with him like dressed up like another person doing an assassination against some random guy. It was kind of cool to watch, I guess, but completely pointless. So that was kind of silly. We did find out that he had like his little like room where he does his costume changes, and then later on, so back to the present. So then they meet, and then Duncan's like, all right, well, good luck, bro. And then Johnny K like shoots him in the back and comes up to cut his head off, but there's some dudes come up, and so Johnny K like runs away because, you know, I guess that's the one thing he does follow, is that people can't find out about him. Or I think it made more sense in my head for him because he's very concerned. The reason he was going to kill Duncan behind his back is because Duncan knows what he looks like, and he can't have anybody know what he looks like because that's like his thing, I guess. But that doesn't work out. So then he tries to blow Duncan up later in a building, and then and so Duncan's like, all right, I have enough of this shit. So this is why Duncan creates like a human-sized doll of himself and then puts it in the window of his like gym. And so when Johnny K comes to shoot him with like a high-powered rifle, then he's going to go cut his head off. Duncan actually he like sneaks up on him, which is pretty hard to do because of the immortal thing where they can sense each other. But I guess maybe he's close enough that he just assumed it was the guy in the building or something. And so Duncan rolls up with swords and they fight, and then Johnny K tries to like tase him, and then Duncan's like, no, fuck you, blocks it with like his sword, and then kills Johnny K, and like high fives all around. Meanwhile, in a totally different episode of this show that is occurring at the same time within the same time slot, we have the story of Joe. He's hanging out at his bar with Duncan, and this lady shows up, and he's like, holy shit, it's Betsy. Who the fuck's Betsy? And Betsy wants to hang out with Joe. Joe keeps like kind of being like, oh no, I don't got time. I got to do this shit. And Duncan's like, you know what? I'm going to fix your bar tap. That's right. That's why he's going to tools fix the bar tap so that Joe could go on this date. And so then the next day they're like, and Joe's like really sketchy about the whole situation. Doesn't want to talk about it with Duncan. Joe is like he's a huge bitch boy, this whole like telenovela that he's starring in. And so Duncan is like fixing the bar tap and is like, don't you have a lunch date to go on? Stop razzing me. And Joe's like, oh, it's not going to happen. And Duncan's like, why are you being such a bitch, man? What happened? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. And he's like, motherfucker, I am your best and possibly only friend. Like, you need to fucking, like, all your other friends are dead. I've met all of them. Like, what's his fuck? And that other loser. They're all dead. They all got killed by immortals or by both of you. Anyway, so where was I going on with this? Oh, and so he's like, okay, fine. So then he reveals that he used to be like captain of the football team or some bullshit before he went off to war, and that he was dating Betsy, and they'd like dance and party all the time and smoke weed, supposedly. She like hints at it pretty heavily later on. And that, you know, then he went to war and he lost like his leg, and that he never went back, and he could never look at her in the face, and if she saw him, she would like hate him. And it's like, oh my God, dude, you're like a 70-year-old. I mean, he's probably like in his 50s. You're like a 50-year-old man. Like, she's not going to give a fuck, right? Like, Jesus Christ. And so Duncan finally convinces him to go on a date with her. And so she shows up, and he's standing there with the cane, and she's like, oh, what's this all about? Something wrong with your knee? And he's like, oh, yeah, I don't have one. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry about that. That sucks. And he's like, you don't care that I don't have a knee? And she's like, why would I care about that? We're like friends, and I want to have sex with you. And he's like, oh, yeah, I want to have sex with you too. All right, let's do this. So then they eat, and everything's great, and they talk about the war, and talk about her going to like Woodstock and smoking the devil's weed. And then they dance for a little bit, and they go back to like her hotel room, and he fucks the shit out of her. And he's like dancing on air, you know, he's like a teenage boy again, because, you know, he's I don't know, Arrested Development or something. And then Duncan's like, oh, that's cool, good for you, bro. And then like, you know, later that day or the next day, he's like, she shows up at the bar and he's like, hey, I got some plans for tonight, we're gonna do this, go to that, and you know, fuck some more this evening. And she's like, I can't, I have to go back home. And he's like, oh, and he's like, he just puts his head down like a fucking like sad sack potato. I don't know how to describe it. I was like, the fuck, man? Who wrote this shit? Like, it's awful. So he was just like super sad and positive. He's like, okay, dude, you can go back home, fine, whatever. And she's like, goodbye, Joe. And he's me. And then he's like moping about it to Duncan while he's building his life-size doll. I can't get over this. Fucking life-size doll with his hands. He's like he's like a Vietnamese like grandmother. It's like sewing this fucking thing. Jesus Christ. It's a particular reference you'd understand if you were from where I'm from. But anyway, he and then Duncan finally convinced, he's like, why don't you just go ask her why she's leaving? It's not, oh, it's because I'm a cripple. Did she say that? Well, no, I just know. Do you know, Joe? Joe, are you just being a bitch? Is that what this is about? Oh, maybe I am being a bitch. You are being a bitch, Joe. Just go ask her why she's leaving. Okay, fine. So he goes over there, and he's like standing in the door, watching her creepily pack her clothes, and she thinks he's like the cabbie, because she's like, oh, I'll be down in 1 second. And he's like, oh, there's no reason for that. Jesus Christ, I'm gonna hit by a semi-truck. There's no reason for that. I wanted to chat with you. And she's like, Joe, it's so good to see you. I wasn't expecting to see you. And he's like, look, I just wanted to find out, like, is this because I'm crippled? And she's like, what? No, fuck no. I can't be with you. I wasn't honest with you. And then she goes to like her armoire, and if you're not retarded, you figured it out. Yep, she's married with kids. And so she pulls out her like wedding ring and puts it back on. And she's like, sorry, I lied to you. I've been good over you for like 30 years. And like when I saw your thing, I took like 2 months to build my courage up because I was gonna like cheat on my husband, who I've been married to for like 30 fucking years. And so I came over and then we fucked, and I was like, now I kind of feel bad, but not really, because I gotta fuck like my high school boyfriend, and my husband's never gonna find out, which is awesome because I'm like 50 years old, and it's like I'm gonna get pregnant or anything. And then and so, you know, and then like, oh, okay. And then cool, high fives all around, I guess. And then the next day, after, you know, Duncan's like slaying his demon, and Joe's slaying his demon, right? He they're like chit-chatting about it, and he's like, you know what, I feel kind of good actually. She like pined after me for 30 years. That's pretty good. And Duncan's like, right, bro? And that's the end of the episode. This fucking show. Episode 5 is just flat out fantastic. It stars Amanda. Well, it stars Duncan, but the key guest, I guess, for this episode, which is what we're doing here in season 5, is Amanda. She's fantastic. But it actually starts off very interesting enough. We get this like very dramatic retelling of a story that occurred in Duncan MacLeod's life, where like he rescues this lady from this like pig-faced man, and then we find out it's a book that this chick's writing, Carolyn something. And Amanda's at the book reading because she loves romance novels, because she loves romance. Even though she's not built for romance, which is the conversation her and Duncan have later on in the episode, she is like all about like the moment to moment, like, oh, I just want to flick my bean and read these stories about being swept off my feet and all that stuff. But then it's like in real life when it's like, oh, I want to be swept off my feet and be with somebody day to day. She's like, nah, I'm good. It's just fuck that. Anyway, so then she brings this book to Duncan because the star of the book is Duncan MacLeod. That's right. And the bad guy that he fights to rescue the dame is Tennyson, and Tennyson's also an immortal, a real immortal. So this lady, who supposedly has no association with the immortals at all, not only has the bad guy being an immortal, but the good guy as Duncan MacLeod is immortal. So Duncan and Amanda, so then this lady like shows up at Duncan's dojo where, Duncan and Amanda are talking about it, and Duncan's actually trying to get in touch with her through her publicist to be like, hey, what the fuck is going on here? So they go talk to her, and then she tries to come on to Duncan, and Amanda comes along, and they're like chit-chatting, and then she tells like, there's like, oh, Duncan MacLeod keeps popping up throughout all the ages as like a person who's like a hero, and he's like a representative of a hero and all this stuff. So I want you to come to like this soiree of mine and be like Duncan MacLeod so that women will buy more of my books. And he's like, no. And she's like, oh, please. And she like blackmails him kind of. And he's like, all right, fine. So he shows up, and then meanwhile, Tennyson like reads the book, tears the cover, and throws it away and gets super mad. So he shows up at the party too. And then Duncan and Tennyson know each other because the real story that this actual story that the books were written off of took place very differently. So Duncan's just like hanging out by his horse, and this prostitute essentially rolls up and is like, please save me, he's trying to take my honor and rape me or whatever. And then Tennyson rolls up, he's like, hey, that woman owes me money. And Duncan's like, I will protect her honor. And then they start arguing, and they pull out swords, and then the lady hops on Duncan's horse and rides away. And then Tennyson's like, look, motherfucker, I told you. And Duncan's like, fair. Well, I have money and you have a horse, you want to go to town and get drunk? And he's like, yep, let's do it. And so they do. So back to the present, we find out that Tennyson and Amanda want to kill Carolyn. I mean, not for realsy, but like pretendsies, I guess. And we find out more why Tennyson does later. Amanda does because she asked about if there was ever in the histories that she read about Duncan that she's writing all her stories about. Did he ever have like a true love? And she's like, well, there was this girl in Turkey, but she was just a whore and a thief. And Amanda's like, oh, I was neither a whore nor a thief. Well, I was kind of both. But so good. Anyway, so what we come to find out throughout the episode is Duncan's trying to protect Carolyn from Tennyson, and Amanda's trying to like not get Carolyn to fuck Duncan, and Duncan doesn't really want to fuck her, but like, you know, he's game for whatever. And she's aight. So what we find out is that Carolyn and Tennyson actually met like 6 years ago and like fell in love and then got married, I think. And then he told her all about being an immortal and all the stuff he'd done. And then she got super jealous and mad because she's from like New Jersey or something, or Newark. And she's not like, you know, she comes from no money. And Tennyson's like this super handsome, like immortal who's like had sex with like Helena Troy or some bullshit and all this stuff. And she's just some nobody from Newark is how she pronounces it to herself. And so, you know, she like has a breakdown and Amanda like comforts her and they talk about it. And she's like, bro, you don't know anything about dudes. You just want like, if a dude is like, says something to you 9 times out of 10, especially in the 90s, that's what he meant. It's like guys are not dumb. They're not like, you know, they're not women. I mean, there are women now in like 2025 because they're very more schemy and stuff like that. But back in the day, right? And most men are still just like guys. Like if a guy likes a woman, he's gonna be like, I like you. And then the woman's going to be like, oh, teehee, right? I'm going to be manipulative and do all this crazy bullshit because women are awful. But most guys are just like chilling. Like, you know, you get those, the Chads or whatever, I guess. I've known plenty of dudes who like fuck chicks, and like I've never had, even my most dirtbag of friends has never been like completely honest with a woman about just like, hey, I'm just here to hit it and quit it. Like I had a buddy who would literally fuck Tinder whores like a different one like every single day, and every time he would like match with them, he's like, hey, I'm just in this for like sex, heads up. And they'd be like, that's fine. And then they would like lose it at him because they'd call it like they would call him back and he'd be like, look, we fucked, I'm done. And she'd be like, you led me on. And he's like, no, I literally didn't lead you on. I literally told you the fuck that exactly how this was gonna go down. Like your brain led you on. Like that's on you. Anyway, fun times. So it all, you know, so Tennyson like kidnaps his wife essentially from one of her book readings, like romantically. It picks her up and carries her out of there, and they're like chit chatting. He's like, let me make you dinner, and she's like super mad at him because she's a dumb bitch, and he just wants to treat her nice and be in love and do all this stuff. And she like ran off and like wrote a bad story about him because she's an asshole, to be honest. And so then she invites Duncan to like meet up with Tennyson at this like mealtime thing to protect her, and then while that's going on, her and Amanda are having like girl time, and she's like, oh no, I really do love him, and blah 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 blah. And so they go to interfere because Amanda realizes that everything that's going to go down, and she doesn't want Tennyson to kill Duncan or vice versa. So they race over there, and then Duncan shows up at Tennyson's place. He's like, the fuck are you doing here? And he's like, I'm here to protect the girl from like this. And they're like, oh yeah, let's fight. And they start fighting with like chicken sticks or something, and then they fight with swords, and then the girls show up, and they're like, the boys are still fighting, and the girls are like, something, she's in love with you, I'm in love with you, blah 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 blah. And then they kiss, and then Amanda's like, aww, and then Duncan's like, let's get the fuck out of here. These dumb bitches. Because they're you know, they're in love and they finally made up. So then we get like the sappy like Irish Celtic women music that plays like when his like first true love from like the clan died, the redheaded chick. And Amanda and him are like walking along the seashore of Gotham with like the sun setting in the background. It's very romantic, and she's like, I just want to be swept off my feet, and I want to be in love. And he's like, you do love me. And she's like, yeah, but something something. And he's like, I love you too. And she's like, what does that even mean? And he's like, well, it's not like mortal love, it's like different. And she's like, no, I want real love, I want like mortal love. And he's like, no, you don't. And and she's like, yes, I do. And then he's like, I want to be swept off my feet. He picks her up, and she's like, what's going on? And he's like, all right, listen, Amanda, we're in love with each other, that's fair, but like, how long are we gonna last? Like, if you move into my house and be my wife, and then like, you know, do wife stuff, and then it's like day to day to day to day to day to day to day. How long do you think we're gonna last? And she's like, I don't want to think about it. And he's like, exactly. Exactly, motherfucker. I was like, let's just not define it. Let's just be cool and chill and just like, you know, be who we are. And she's like, okay, fine, but I do want some romance at times. And he's like, done. And they like make out. That's the end of the episode. It was awesome. Fucking fantastic. Episode 6 here is a pretty goofball episode. Not gonna lie. So we got Amanda, Richie, and Duncan. And Amanda is taking Richie to some sort of like shady, I don't want to call it a bank, like a shady loan place or something to like send money or to retrieve money internationally, or I don't know. They have like a brief conversation about it, but I didn't really understand what they were trying to do with the whole situation. But It's in like a shady part of town underneath like an overpass with like graffiti and homeless people and stuff. And Richie's like, I'm just going to wait out here and eat this hot dog from this shady vendor instead of going inside this place with you. So as Amanda enters, she finds a guy in a mask with a Tommy gun, like robbing the place. And she's like, Corey! And he's like, Amanda! Because Corey, dun-da-da, is an old friend of Duncan and Amanda's. So they rob the place and they take off in a van, and Richie is just like standing there like, the fuck's happening? And so they take off, and then Richie follows along in his motorcycle bike. And they drive him off the road into like a river. And Amanda's like, Corey, that wasn't very nice. And he's like, YOLO, baby. So then Richie climbs his way out. Amanda and Corey go and like switch the white van out for like some old like 1920s like Roadster or whatever, blue Roadster. And they drive back and they almost run into Richie again, so he has to dive back in the water again. Hilarity ensues. They then go to like his hideout, which is like this cabin, and Richie goes to Duncan and be like, hey man, I got picked up by some other immortal, I don't know, and he like identifies like the vehicle they were driving or whatever. And then they go to a antique car guy, and Duncan pretends very sillily to be like a French filmmaker, and Adrian Paul, who plays Duncan, I keep calling him Adrian Peterson, I know, but I think it's Adrian Paul. He pretends to be French. He's French in like real life, and so that's kind of funny. So they figure out where the vehicle's at. They head over there. Amanda's being kind of wishy-washy because she's kind of with Duncan right now, but then like Corey's like an old flame sort of, and she gets kind of like mixed vibes about the whole situation. And this episode spent a lot of time dealing with like Mac allowing Amanda to like do what she wants and not being forceful enough, in being like essentially Duncan not being like man enough to stay with Amanda, which tells her, because she's a crazy bitch, that he's not committed. And Richie even at some point has a conversation with her where he's like, what is wrong with you? Duncan wants to be with you. And she says, well, sometimes women just want to feel like they're needed. And he's like, I don't fucking understand why you're so crazy. And she's like, 'cause I am. And I was like, fair. Anyway, we get a very extended scene of them in like the 1920s, and it's pretty much the same thing in this episode. So Amanda is doing some sort of performance. Duncan's hanging out with her. They're driving around, and then there's a bunch of cows in the road, so they stop. And then across from like the cows on the same road, they watch this armored vehicle get robbed by Corey, who's an immortal because they can sense him. So then they follow him essentially to like this farmhouse where he's giving all the money away to these farmers so they can move out of like Gotham to go to California, where there's like better prospects, because it's like, well, not the 1920s. Was that when the Depression was? It's during the Depression era time. I'm not a big American guy, so I don't really know when that happened, but I know it happened like sometime around then. Anyway, they are headed, like Corey gives them the car too, and then he hops in with Amanda and Duncan, and they're driving back. And then these like police officer guys like roll up, and they're like, "Oh no, we're in trouble!" And Corey's like, "Just dig me out of the ground." And he hops up and he like fires his Tommy machine gun in the air, and he's like, "I got these hostages. If you do anything to me, I'll kill them." And then they shoot him dead. And then Amanda and Duncan are like, "Oh no, but I got the vapors. He kidnapped us," and all this stuff. And then we see Duncan later like digging him up out of his casket. And then Corey's like, we have a great team. This is a great system. The three of us are going to be fantastic. We should all go across the country and keep doing this." And Duncan's like, "What? You getting killed after robbing a bank and then me digging you up?" And he's like, "Yes." And then we get he's like, "I'm not doing it." And then so Corey and Amanda are like, "Well, we're gonna go." And this is the part where Amanda's like, "I'm gonna go. Are you gonna come with me or ask me not to go?" And he's like, "Do what you want." And then she gets like really butthurt about the fact that he's not like, "No, you're gonna stay with me, woman." She wants to be dominated by his masculinity, and he's too much of like a modern man to like be like, "No, bitch, you stay here. Fuck that guy." And that's what she wants, because that's what every woman wants. So he ends up cucking and going with them, and then they like rob a bunch of places. He keeps sticking them up, and finally he's like, "I'm done with this shit. Adios." And then that brings us back to the modern era, where it's a similar thing going on. And the reason we know this is because Duncan and Richie track down the vehicle, and then they find Corey and Amanda, and then Duncan's like, "Fucking Corey." And so they chit chat for a while, then they all leave, and then Amanda's like, "I'll see you tomorrow." And later on, Duncan's like, "What do you mean you see you tomorrow?" And it's like, "Oh, we're gonna rob a car," like an armored vehicle. And there's a whole plan. And then Duncan's like, they get into like an argument, and then Richie's like, "I'm staying the fuck out of this. Don't bring me in here." And they keep looking over at him, and he's just eating a sandwich, looking the other direction. It's so good, so goofball. And then she like storms off, and he chases after her, and she's like, "What do you want? Tell me what you want." And he's like, "I want you to do whatever you feel like doing." And she's like, "Then I'm leaving." So she goes, and then this is where Richie comes a little bit later and is like, hey, Amanda, you know Duncan really likes you, and like you need to stop being such a bitch. And she's like, I am a bitch, and he better deal with it. And it's okay. And then they talk about like the thrill of like robbing and stuff, and how Richie used to be a thief, and how he's like, yeah, I did that, and I don't miss it. Like I don't want to do that. I'm not going to be a part of your game. And then we find out that Corey is blowing up a car to stop the armored car, and then they're going to gas the guys, and then yada, yada, yada. Right, so Richie tells Duncan the whole plan, and at some point, okay, so the guy Corey robbed ends up being some sort of like Russian gangster or something, and he ended up stealing like $1.4 million, which is a lot from like this shady little like side business. And he has like one of the police officers in his payroll, so he sends the police officer, track him down, the guy tracks him down, and so then the police officer and the goons roll up when Richie and Amanda are in there talking, and they snag Amanda, and Richie like dives out of there to go get Duncan and Corey. And so then Duncan goes to get Corey to stop him, and and he punches him, and he's like, that's long overdue, motherfucker. And then he's like, man, what'd you hit me for? He's like, Amanda, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm going to rob this thing. It's no big deal. No one's going to get hurt. And then this band like starts walking up. They're going to like be right where the car's at when it explodes. And Duncan's like, Jesus Christ, man. So he gets the car and drives it away. And then Corey follows him. And Duncan is getting like exploded by the car. But it's like Wile E. Coyote exploded, where he's just like on the ground and there's like smoke and he's all black. And he's like, and Corey's like, man, that looks like it sucked. And he's like, yeah, motherfucker, it sucked. And he's like, let me help you up. And Duncan's like, do not fucking touch me right now. So they go back. They're trying to figure out where Amanda's at. They get a call from these guys, or Amanda gets like her one phone call from these guys to get the ransom. So it's like trade the money for him. So they come up with this whole scheme where they set up the money, and Corey's going to go trade it out, and Amanda's going to get free. And so they go, and then the guy has like fake bombs on him, right? But then they're not fake bombs, because after they rescue Amanda, the guy, both the gangster and his like police buddy like run off. And then Corey's like, do. And then Duncan's like, I'm going to blow him up. And then he does. And then Corey's like, what the fuck, man? And Duncan's like, what the fuck, man? Like, exactly. Don't blow people up, asshole. So the episode wraps up, right? So the episode wraps up. I hope I'm recording all this shit. I am. So the episode wraps up with Duncan and Amanda having like a back and forth again. And she's like, well, I'm going to go with Corey to do some more random bullshit. And he's like, I want you to stay. And she's like, thank you for finally saying that, but no. And then he's like, all right, deuces. And she's like, see you in Paris. And he says some more French shit, and then she leaves. So it's a weird episode, not going to lie. It was fun. It was funny, but it's like, okay, there we go. Oh, yeah, episode 7's another banger. Here we go. So we start with a woman. She's in her house, and she's being haunted by a ghost. Like, she keeps seeing this dude playing pianos, and then the windows shatter, and she's freaking out, like, Alec. Meanwhile, Richie is training in the dojo of Duncan MacLeod with his shirt off, and this lady who's very pretty, main actress here, rolls in and is like, sees like the ghost of her husband like touch Richie or in Richie or whatever, and she's like, hey, big fella. And he's like, oh, hey, girly. And she's like, I'm looking for Duncan MacLeod. He's like, lucky guy. So we find out this Jennifer chick is a close friend, or so she was married to Alec. Alec is an old friend of Duncan MacLeod's from like back in the day. And they talk about what happened to him, and she says that he was hunting Coogan, or Kagan, I think it's Coogan, and that he must have died like 2 years ago. And oh, I'm so sad, I'm so sorry. And so Duncan kind of puts Richie with her to like take care of her and make sure she's okay. And so they go off to Joe's bar to like talk about stuff, whatever, and she's getting like real hot and bothered about Richie. Duncan, meanwhile, flies to San Francisco from Gotham, and there he tracks... so let me get the flashback. The flashback is Duncan and Alec are building a house, and then his then-wife, Jennifer, this is like 110 years ago or something, she comes along for lunch, and she makes the boys go clean up in the river, and then while they're cleaning up in the river, the Coogan guy shows up, and he apparently is some crazy asshole who like kidnapped this poor 13-year-old girl and like groomed her, quote unquote. I think it implies that he banged her, but that doesn't say that directly. It says like it gets pretty into like he was teaching her how to act properly and do the right thing and all this kind of stuff, but not like I'm a priest helping a poor person, kind of like an exploitative way. So when Duncan finds and then he's gonna like take her to China or whatever because she's his property or whatnot, and she's freaking out. And so Alec and MacLeod hear about this. They run back up, and he's holding a knife to her neck, and then he's like, "Come fight me like a man, you motherfucker," with the sword. And Coogan's like, "I don't think so." So he like takes Genevieve and jumps off the cliff, and then Alec jumps after, and then McLeod comes down, and Genevieve's dead, and Alec's all sad because it's like the love of his life, and he comes to like later believe in the reincarnation of the soul, essentially, so he's going to wait around until he finds Genevieve's soul again, and he believes Jennifer had Genevieve's soul as it was carried forward, right? So there's a lot of like the mysticism kind of stuff going on here, which is kind of like, is it not? And if you're wondering, hey, this Jennifer chick seems to have like a very strong attraction to Richie. We're going to get to that in a second. So Duncan kills Coogan, or he finds Coogan. He's like doing a porno film, and he's trying to get the actress to like, or he's doing like not a porno film, but he's trying to get the actress to be naked even though she doesn't want to get naked. And Duncan shows up and then kills his ass and is like, take that bitch. And then flies back to Gotham. Meanwhile, Richie and this girl wants to fuck him so bad. Like she's like eyeball fucking him. She's touching his arm, talking about how they feel connected, all this stuff. And then if you're wondering why, and then she's like, I go to the bathroom. So she has the bathroom to like, I don't know, flick her bean or something. And then if you wonder why she feels such a strong attraction to Richie, it's because dun dun dun, Joe comes over and is like, what are you doing with Alec Hill's wife? And Richie's like, oh, I guess Coogan like killed that guy 2 years ago, and Joe and Duncan went to like kill him, and I'm supposed to watch him. And Joe's like, you killed Alec Hill. What? And she's like, I did what? And he's like, yeah, last year or 2 years ago in San Francisco. Do you remember, like, short dark hair, blah, blah, blah? And Richie's like, oh, shit, I did kill that guy. And what happened was, like, 2 years ago, I guess, when Richie was, like, in San Francisco and his bike was broke down, he was, like, in a parking lot, like, fixing his bike, and this asshole, like, rolls up on him who's an immortal, and he's like, get the fuck out of the way. And Richie's like, I'm fixing my bike, give me a minute. And the guy's like, no, I would move it right now. And Richie's like, if you need it to move so fast, why don't you knock it over? And the guy's like, that's it. And he pulls out his sword and goes to Richie, and so Richie fights and kills him. So it's nice to see another battle with Richie, because Richie got, like, no love when it came to fighting for, like, the first 4 seasons, but now he's had like 3 or 4 wins, so like excellent. I'm glad we finally got some of that shit. And so Richie's like, oh shit. And so then Jenny gets back, he's like, hey, I gotta go, don't call me. And so he runs off, and then she's like, what happened? And Joe's like, I wouldn't worry about it, just leave him alone. He's like, it's his period or something. So Richie goes back to his house, and he's like, all right, I need to like detox some of that shit. Wink one out. And then she shows up at his house, and like, how did she know where he lives? No idea. But she does. And then she's like, I need to fuck you right now. And Richie's like, I couldn't help myself. And I'm like, fair. So they fuck. And then so when Duncan gets back, Richie's like, hey man, I gotta talk to you. And Duncan's like, what? He's like, I need to bathe, man. I just like fucking killed the dude and flew across the country twice. And so Richie's like, hey, well, number one, I slept with Jennifer. And Duncan's like, all right, how was it? Like, that's fine. You know, she needs to like move on, so maybe that's a good way to do it. And he's like, yeah, that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is number 2, I killed her husband. And Duncan's like, excuse me? And he's like, yeah. And then he tells him the story, and Duncan's like, holy shit, man, you gotta get out of here. And he's like, I'm real sorry, bro. I know that was your friend. And Duncan's like, hey man, it happens. I can't believe you fucked the wife. And he's like, no, I know, man. It's a shitbag thing to do. I can control myself. And Duncan's like, no. Not acceptable. And Richie's like, all right, I'm gonna go. So he tries to like flee out of there, but then and so Duncan's like, I'll take care of Jennifer. So he tries to talk to Jennifer about what's going on, and he lies to her and says like, oh yeah, I killed Kagan, you're good to go, something, you need to move on and stop worrying about your husband. And she's like, you're right, I do. And so Richie's like packing up, trying to get the fuck out of Dodge, which he literally says, getting the fuck out of Dodge. Jennifer like shows up at his house and is like, hey big boy, I want to fuck again. And Richie's like, I am not gonna fuck you again. And she's like, what is wrong? He's like, it's me, not you. You're great, you're fantastic, I wish we'd be together, but it's not gonna work. And she's like, I don't understand why. And he's like, because I killed your husband, you crazy bitch. And she's like, you what? You asshole, you slept with me and you killed my husband, you're a rapist, something. She doesn't say rapist. And then she storms off, and Richie's like, whew, time to get out of here. And then she goes and yells at Duncan, and Duncan's like, hey bro, it's part of the business, we're all immortals, shit happens. And she's like, I order you to kill him. And he's like, I'm not gonna kill him, he's my friend. And he's like, you killed your other friend, you've been friends with that guy a lot longer. And he's like, yeah man, but I promised Alec I would kill Kagan, and I did, so mission accomplished. Also, we're immortals, like this shit happens, like, you know, people are gonna die. And she's like, oh, I'm so mad. And so she storms off, and Duncan's like, shit man. So he goes and talks to Joe about it, and Joe's like, she just told the truth from the beginning. Anyway, so Duncan goes to check on Richie, which was the smart thing to do, because Jen also goes to Richie and is like, you know, she knocks on his door for some insane reason. He like lets her in, and he's like trying to get out the door, and he's like, all right, cool, I'm gonna go and like leave you alone, and I apologize for, you know, having sex with you after I killed your husband, that's my bad. And she's like, oh yeah, too bad. And she pulls out a gun and shoots him a bunch of times right when Duncan's rolling up, and he's like, fuck. And so he runs up to the whatever, third story or something, and sees her about to cut his head off, and he's like, whoa, 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 everybody calm down. She's like, and then she like having a vision of like Alec telling her to kill Richie, and then Duncan's like, Alec, you don't want her to kill him actually, right? Because you don't want her to carry that death with him forever. And then she's like, what? Is that what you want, Alec? And I'm like, holy cow, this bitch is crazy. And then she sees like Alec being like, goodbye, my love, don't kill Richie or something. And then she's like, I won't do it, but I hope he carries with him I curse him to carry with him the sadness that he has brought me forever or something. And Duncan's like, yeah, I'm sure he will. Later on, after she's gone, Richie wakes up and he's like, fuck. And Duncan's just like chilling there. And he's like, hey, bro, I'm really sorry about killing your friend. You know, it was a mistake. I should have just walked away. And Duncan's like, yeah, man, we all make mistakes. It is what it is. Something. And Richie's like, do you ever get over it? And Duncan's like, if you do and you become cold and heartless, that's when I have to worry about you. But get out of here and I'll see you around. And Richie's like, all right, bro. And so he pieces out. Which wraps up that episode. So the next episode here, number 8. Yeah, I think it's number 8. It's kind of an interesting one. It's called Little Tin God, and it focuses around Larka, I think that's his name, who thinks he's like a god essentially, and he's done this like maneuver in the past. In the past, when Duncan ran into him before, he played a like Mesoamerican god with like kind of like an Aztec style situation with like human sacrifice and stuff. But this time he's playing Jesus. So what happens is we start off and we got this guy. What is this guy's name? Anyway, some guy who's like a fantastic singer at some like Southern Baptist church, and he is like, he gets killed by Larka because Larka knows he's immortal, and then he goes to him in like the morgue and is like pretending to be Jesus because this guy's a Christian, and he's like, rise, my son, and serve me, like I have brought you back to life so that you can do my bidding. And he goes around and like gets these like crazy, he finds like these immortals who aren't quite immortal, and then like, you know, saves them, quote unquote. And then he's what he's really trying to do is get back at Duncan MacLeod, because back in the day, Duncan MacLeod and him had like a little fracas, if you will, because Duncan and like I think one of his homies like stumbled upon this like Aztec thing, and he was like a god to them and all this stuff, and then like Duncan like ruined it because of like something with like a human sacrifice or something, and so they ousted him, and ever since then he's held like a cross, and I think like the people actually like overthrew him and like threw him in a river or something, and he lived there for a while and was like very upset. Anyway, so Duncan in the present, he has to like hide in holy ground because he gets attacked by like 3 of these guys at one time that are like this guy's disciples, but then he's able to convince, God, what was that guy's name? It's Derek? I'm going to go with Derek. Anyway, so Derek, that he's not a bad guy per se, and that he needs to resist this guy because this guy's not actually Jesus. And then he goes and finds Derek's like old minister / music minister guy, and has him like help convince Derek that this guy's not actually Jesus Christ, that he's tricking him, and that Jesus would never ask someone to like kill somebody in this manner, and yada, yada, yada. And so Derek like bows out of the situation, and then Duncan confronts the guy who's pretending to be Jesus about the whole situation, and the guy's like, you ruined my life, you took away everything, blah 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 blah. And then we do get some interesting information here. We find out that this guy's going to push these guys, like this guy is not going to fight in holy ground, but he will push these other guys to fight in holy ground because they almost attacked him on holy ground, right? And that when at some point in the episode Duncan's talking to Joe about it, and Joe's like, there is a record of 2 immortals fighting on Duncan ground, and Duncan's like, when was that? And he's like, Pompeii in 79 AD, or yeah, something like that. Anyway, whenever the volcano hit and killed all those people. So when there's something about like being immortal, this again, like the mysticism in this season is kind of like, it's a little more interesting. It's not that hard, but it is like, okay, so I guess magic does exist, right? It keeps coming up kind of randomly. But that because of this, attacking on holy ground, that's what caused the volcano to attack and kill everybody in Mount Vesuvius or whatever. And so it's like, should not do, bad. Anyway, at some point, Duncan is able to utilize Derek to isolate Larka so that he has a duel with Larka and is able to kill him and take his head, which destroys his like thing or whatever. And then the guy he got to help him gets recruited into like the Watcher system because by Joe, because essentially he had to explain the whole situation to him and help him understand. And there's something about Joe's like, well, he's not officially a watcher, but he's like a watcher in theory, or like in assistance or some crazy nonsense, which is like adorbs. Anyway, but yeah, so it's a pretty good episode, interesting stuff, and yeah. All right, so this next episode is pretty baller. We got this guy who's claiming to be Mythos, who's not Mythos. He's actually played by what's that guy's name? He's in a lot of stuff. I want to say John Paul, but I know that's not it. He was Hellboy in the Hellboy movies, the original ones that were much better than the one with the guy from Stranger Things. He's got like that. He's got like a very masculine face. In this, he plays Peacekeeper. In fact, he's pretending to be Mythos. And he's going around telling immortals not to fight anymore and that they should just be at peace and stuff. And so Richie and him bump into each other, and he convinces Richie that that the mortals should all team up and stop being a-holes to each other, and they should stop fighting and be at peace and whatnot. And that's the whole point of the episode, is this guy is just like, he's earnest and he's honest. I mean, he's not Mythos, but but that's his thing. And so a bit later, Richie actually was on his way to meet up with Duncan, because Duncan's like buying a boat from some old sailor, and the boat is like a piece of junk, and he's trying to talk the guy down from like the $50,000 down to like $20,000, which is a pretty good deal for like a legit boat. Like trying to get that nowadays, it'd be like $100,000 for this thing. Anyway, so that's fun. But then he senses this guy, and this guy was like a Confederate officer in the World War II, and Duncan was like running the Underground Railroad and rescuing slaves and stuff. And then a buddy of his who was a slave that he's rescuing gets shot, and then they get dragged off to this Confederate prison camp. And this other immortal guy, I don't remember his name, he was a part of this thing, and he's like the show tries to play him off as like kind of sympathetic, and I think they do a pretty good job. Duncan's like absolutely not having any part of it, because he's treating this like prison camp like it's like it's not the Holodomor, that's the fasting thing. It's like the gulags. It's like the gulags in like Ukraine for the kulaks and stuff like that, right? Like it's like he's just shooting people, and he's like starving them and causing like a real bad situation all around. So Duncan tries to argue with him about that and about the morality of what he's doing, and the guy keeps getting reports about like his family getting killed and about the war and what it's like to be a war and lead a war and be in charge of this camp and all that stuff. So at some point, this guy bumps into, like, Duncan and him are fighting, and then Richie comes along and stops Duncan, because Richie's seen the light and he's no more war and they shouldn't fight and kill anymore. And Duncan's like, the fuck are you talking about? Which is funny that Duncan gets real butthurt about Richie trying not to kill people, when literally they had an episode. Like, if you listen to this, like, however, these videos tend to be like 2 hours long. If you listen to this like 2 hour video, you may have remembered like 2 or 3 episodes ago with our friend Jennifer, who had sex with Richie, that Richie killed one of Duncan's friends because that's what immortals do. And now Richie's like, man, maybe we shouldn't kill people so much. And Duncan's like, no, that's what we do. And I'm like, bro. The writing in this season is all over the place. Like, each one of these episodes is good on their own, but it's like the consistency. You can tell this is kind of like the last season. And it's not, but the last season, season 6 is really like they were trying to like figure out how to continue the series, because I think Adrian Paul here was like done with the TV series, or they were done with the TV series or the radio. I don't know the exact specifics, but they were like really trying to move on. And we'll get there when we get to season 6, but it's a lot of it is just like, hey, check out these other immortals that might be good to like be a showrunner. And they ended up going with Amanda to do her own season, which we'll watch after season 6. And it ran for one season. It's all right. But I think they were trying to like push like a female immortal series, which is not a bad idea, because you look at like, I think they were pulling from like Hercules and Xena, right? Like Hercules was super popular, and then they had the Xena as like a spinoff, and her show was like just as, if not more popular, because she was like a babe, and you had that other girl who was also a babe, who was supposed to be like 16, but she's like in her late 20s. But like Renee Russo, I think is her name. But yeah, so I think they were trying to do the same thing here, and it just didn't pan out. But where was I? Okay, yeah. So, so Duncan's mad at him. They have an argument. Joe gets involved, and the actual Mythos shows up, and he's like, oh, I've heard of this other Mythos. That's hilarious. Because Duncan's like, hey, man, you gotta stop talking to Richie about all this crazy nonsense. And he's like, I'm not talking to Richie about anything. He's like, that's other Mythos. And it's like, who's this other Mythos? And they're all trying to figure out if he's legit or not. And then also, Joe finds out that like every time Mythos goes around and gets an immortal not to like fight anymore, like those immortals like die. But it's not this guy's fault. It's like other immortals coming along and be like, you don't want to fight anymore? Cool, sounds good, dead. And that's what ends up happening here. So Richie and Fake Mythos, like, they hang out, they like talk a lot. Richie's finally like super convinced. He hands the sword back over to Duncan. Duncan's like, yo, hey man, you do whatever you want. I'm going to be a little brat hippopotamus about this whole situation, and Joe and Mythos are going to have to like convince me to actually go and help you, because the Confederate general guy, he ends up tracking down him. He ends up bumping into the guy again, of Fake Mythos, and then and then he like kills Fake Mythos, and then he waits around for Richie, and Richie shows up as like his disciple, and then he starts fighting Richie, but it's not really a fight because Richie doesn't have a sword, so he's like running away. The guy's like chasing him with the sword. Richie's trying to talk about honor and peace and all that stuff, and the guy's like, fuck your peace. And then eventually Duncan shows up and tosses Richie a sword, and Richie's able to like dispatch that guy pretty quick. And then he like apologizes to Duncan for not listening to him. He's sorry, Dad. And Duncan's like, it's okay. I literally told you the complete opposite advice like 2 episodes ago. He doesn't say that, but that's literally what happens. So they chit chat for a little bit, and Richie's like, hey man, I'm gonna head out of town for a little bit and just kind of figure my stuff out. And I'm like, bro, you literally just went out of town like 2 episodes. That other episode, man, that was a good episode. This was a good episode, but like, it's like, was no one like checking to like see if these things made sense together? I guess not. I guess that's where we're at now in this like kind of final season. They're just kind of wrapping. Excuse me. But yeah, no, it was good. And so yeah, that kind of wraps that up.
The next episode is kind of boring, to be completely honest. It does the whole thing where it's like, what if we could have killed Hitler? And it's this argument that is like ridiculous, but I do appreciate the episode. It has, we have Mythos and Joe back in here, and Mythos makes a whole argument with Duncan about killing people doesn't stop these events from going on. Like, there's like this theory, I'm not a history major or anything, but it's like the great man versus... Golly, I don't remember. Let me look it up. It's like the great man theory or whatever, where it's like historical events occur because of great men in history, but then there's like a counter argument where it's like just great things happen. I'm just pulling up ChatGPT while we talk. Anyway, so there's a lady Highlander, or the Highlander, a lady immortal, Ingrid Henning. Her and Duncan and some sort of other guy were part of the Valkyrie plot, or I think it's called Valkyrie. Valkyrie is this thing that there's a whole movie with like Tom Cruise that was made out of it. Okay, here we go. Great man theory. Great man theory argues that history is primarily shaped by exceptional individuals, such as Hitler, right? And then the opposite theories are emphasize like just kind of regular people, or that these great men are products of their history, or part of their... The great men to come, the great men to exist, but they're part of the society in which they exist, and if it wasn't for them, it'd be somebody else. And then there's the Annalise School, which focuses more on geography, climate, and economics for long-term, how individuals develop and like their base and all that stuff. Anyway. Okay, thanks. I don't need help writing emails. So Duncan MacLeod and her, they're part of Operation Valkyrie, which is a real life thing, which was a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler by like blowing him up at some sort of meeting. And like I said, the movie Valkyrie, I think it's called Valkyrie, with Tom Cruise, is in it, and that's where you get that fun meme that if you've ever seen it, where Hitler's just like very angry and he's shouting things in German, and then people like change the words to be like their football team lost somehow, and it's like a very funny scene in that regard. And then not only does the blowing up doesn't work, that's what happened in real life, is that they tried to blow him up and he survived. But then Ingrid has a chance to shoot him, but then she hesitates because killing people is wrong and stuff like that, which is odd. But anyway, so she eventually hooks up with all these different organizations and becomes like a professional assassin, and she's like killing other tyrants and stuff. Like currently there's some guy in like, I want to say it looks like Russia-ish. And the episode starts off with her showing up and killing a couple people, but then there's some guy who's going to take over some country, and he wants to like bring back communism or something and be a tyrant. And so she wants to kill that guy too. And then Duncan runs into her and is like, they have like a back and forth about that. And then Mythos has a back and forth with Duncan about it. And Duncan's like, well, maybe she's right. Maybe we do need to do something. Maybe we should step in. And then that's where Mythos slaps in. Like, if it wasn't Hitler, it'd been somebody else. Like, killing him's not going to like change things. And honestly, my theory, which I agree with Mythos on this, is like, hey, part of the reason the Nazis like were not successful is because Hitler was such a crazy person. So if you had somebody like Rommel, the Germans would have probably like pushed a lot harder and like been much more successful. in their endeavors because he was not a crazy person, like literally a crazy person, not just like, oh, he's crazy because he killed Jews and stuff. No, like literally, like his mind did not work right. And that kind of saved a lot of people's lives at the end of the day, because like the whole movement was like, let's go, we're doing this. And so at some point, Duncan has to go like stop her. Generally, he does this by cutting off her head, and they don't fight. He just like shows up and is like, hey, you better stop this crazy thing you're doing, or I'm going to stop you. And then afterwards, he's like super sad eponymous about it, and he's talking to Mythos about it, and they're having like he's like, I don't know if I did the right thing, and Mythos says, you did the right thing. And that's the episode. And it's kind of boring. The whole like Valkyrie thing and Hitler and whatnot are kind of boring, to be completely honest. The next episode's much more interesting. We've got Cassandra. She's back. Remember the immortal who can, I don't know, see the future and like convince people of things? It also introduces us to like the 4 horsemen. Yes, that's right. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So the main one we deal with is Corin. Corin is a douchebag who like attacked Cassandra's village like 5,000 years ago or something, or 4,000, 2,000. I don't know. So at some point she was just like chilling in her little village out in the middle of like nowhere, and the 4 horsemen rolled up, which included Corin and 3 other guys. So they fight, or so they didn't fight. They just like killed people. This is like during the Bronze Age or something. And these nomadic raiders just like, it was, there's 4 immortals, right? So they would just wander around and kill people and attack things and destroy. They apparently destroyed entire civilizations, like the Bronze Age collapse is attributed to them here, whatever. And they would just like wander in and enslave people and slaughter people. And they kept Cassandra a slave for years, apparently, like after they destroyed her village and captured her. So it's pretty good stuff. So there's Duncan like runs into Corin out and about, like after him and Mythos. They go to like a play or something. And then Duncan runs into the guy, and then he does some research on the guy, and there's like no information about him from the Watchers, because they were this whole thing happened like much earlier than the Watcher organization. And Mythos obviously didn't record it because dun dun dun, he was one of the 4 horsemen. What? So Mythos and Kronos like run into each other, and Kronos like knocks him out, and they have a conversation about the good old days and how he's trying to like find all the horsemen and bring back the end of the world, and end things, and there can be only one, and such and such. And then Cassandra gets pulled in, and she's gonna fight Kronos, but then Duncan fights Kronos, but then Mythos saves Kronos kind of, or like saves Duncan from Kronos. There's a whole thing where Mythos has like a dark side, it seems, but at the same time he seems just kind of like, I don't know if he's like playing both sides or whatnot. This is like a 2-parter episode, so we'll find out more in the next episode, obviously. But in this one, it's just pretty good with that. And then Duncan gets like really into it with Mythos, because he finds out that Mythos finally reveals that he's like Death, the horseman Death. And then we get some, all the flashbacks involve like the raiding and Cassandra and stuff. Cassandra's like super pissed off about the whole situation, and she wants to kill Mythos, but Duncan's like, no, he's my friend. And it's like, is he really his friend? Is he gonna go do more evil stuff? And like, I don't know if I can be friends with someone who was evil like 6,000 years ago. And it's like, bro, like people change. I mean, mostly. Anyway. So they after the fight with Kronos, where he almost kills Cassandra, and then Duncan saves her, and then they fight, and then at some point Kronos is like, oh, you saved your little friend Duncan. He's like, no, I saved you. And he's like, I could take Duncan. And he's like, could you? And then Joe's trying to defend Mythos and saying like Mythos is his friend, and like people change, and Duncan's like, I don't know about that. I can't deal with this anymore. And the episode wraps up with Kronos trying to go back after Duncan, and Mythos is like, no, wait, we got to go get, I wrote their names down, Caspian and Silas as the other 2 horsemen, and they're alive and they're around, and we can go find them because I know where they're at. And then Kronos is like, ha ha ha, yes, let's reunite the 4 horsemen and end the world, dun dun dun. So the conclusion to this excellent 2-parter episode commences here. So we begin with like a fetch quest, but the fetch quest is to get Silas and Caspian. So Silas is out in the woods just cutting fucking logs. And he is cool. Him and Mythos are like super best friends, I guess. There's a whole thing in this episode with him. Like he's like Mythos' favorite, even though they're all kind of like brothers in arms. And then Caspian, he went on like a murder rampage at some point, and he was locked up in an insane asylum. And
Duncan, so Mythos knows all this. Mythos takes Kronos to go get Silas. They have like a fun little meetup there. Then they go get Caspian and they kill the doctor that was like keeping him there. And then they go start making plans on how to like destroy the world. Meanwhile, Duncan and Cassandra they meet up with Joe and they try to figure out where Caspian or Silas is. They can't find Silas, but they find Caspian. They find a guy kind of similar to Caspian who's like an immortal who got locked up, and like that's got to be the guy who's in Romania's Bucharest. Let's go. So then Duncan and Cassandra Cassandra stays in France, I think, and then Duncan heads out to Romania to kind of figure that situation out. And he gets there like one day too late and he finds out that the doctor's dead and all that stuff. Meanwhile, Kronos and crew, or Mythos and crew, however you want to look at it, they go and they capture like some lab where they're creating some sort of like super deadly virus that they can like put in the water supply and kill everybody, right? And they talk about, they have some back and forth. Silas just wants to get on horses and ride downtown and just like start murdering people with swords on horseback because he loves looking people in the eye when he murders them. And then Mythos, who's like the brains of the operation and always has been, says like, no, this is what we're going to do. And then Kronos essentially is like, let's just get a nuke and kill everybody. And then Mythos is like, no, bro, you got to like instill fear and all this stuff. Like, it's like, you're such a barbarian. And so it's like, we're going to kill a couple people, then a couple more people, then like 10,000 people, then a whole city. And then we'll be like, the rest of the world's we're going to rule, or everyone's going to die. It's the end of the world. And then like, if we decide, we can just end the world later. And Kronos is like, yeah, I like that idea. That's excellent. It's got a nice ring to it. At some point, Duncan is back in France. They're all in France, right? And they start executing on their plan to like blow up like a fair or something. And Duncan gets a call and Cassandra's like going real hard in the paint about killing Mythos and all this stuff. And Duncan's still like concerned, was like, no, Mythos is my friend, yada, yada, yada. And he gets a secret call from Mythos. So he goes to meet up with Mythos at a church. Mythos kind of explains that Cassandra is not just butthurt about the fact that they kill all those people. It's the fact that he like abandoned her essentially. So she was like his servant before she found out she was immortal, I think. And she was, they were like kind of lovers at the same time. And then Kronos wanted to like share in the love because he's a total psychopath, and Mythos just like let him do it because Kronos is like a force of nature according to Mythos and his brother, so he can't like stop him from doing things. And there's a lot of conversation about like, why didn't Mythos kill Kronos years ago? Why didn't he try to stop him? And how at the end of the episode, like Mythos kind of organized this whole thing in the last two episodes to get Kronos and Silas, or to get Kronos to finally be dead. But Silas, who he liked a lot, was part of like, he was kind of like a tragic death in this for Mythos, because he always liked Mythos the best, or Mythos liked Silas the best, and so he's super satapotamus at the end, and we'll get more into that in a second. But for now, so he tells Duncan where the bomb's going to be and that he should go, and so Duncan runs off to there. Now, meanwhile, Kronos, Silas, and Caspian, they all go jump Cassandra and drag her back to their little like base of operations. And well, we get like, yeah. And so we find out that after Kronos took Cassandra to like rape her, she like stabbed him in the nuts or whatever, and then like ran off. And then she died probably multiple times trying to escape from them, and eventually figuring out that she was an immortal and all this stuff. And then future goes, right? So that's part of like the whole heartache with them and whatnot. We get that all in kind of like flashback. Anyway. So then Mythos is talking to Kronos about, like, he's like, oh, Cassandra's here. And then Kronos like knew that Mythos went and like warned Duncan about the bomb, and that didn't go out well, but it's like, this is, he's not going to get another chance, and yada, yada, yada. And then he sent Silas and Caspian to go fight Duncan because like they can only fight one at a time, but once Duncan kills one of them or dies, he either dies or he gets beat. And then while he's like, still recovering from the quickening, the other guy can go up and kill him. And so when we get a fight with him, Duncan gets jumped by the two of those guys. He ends up fighting Caspian, and realizing what's going on, as soon as he kills Caspian's head off, he like jumps in the river to go away, and Silas isn't able to find him. But then Duncan uses, I don't know, he talks to like one guy and figures out where they're at. And the new thing is that Silas is gonna kill Cassandra if Duncan like shows up as like a bargaining chip, and then Mythos and Kronos are gonna go like poison the well of the city to kill everybody. And as they're trying to head out, Duncan runs into him, and then Mythos gets sent back to tell Silas to kill Cassandra because Duncan's gonna fight Kronos, and Kronos is like, let's do this. And so they start fighting, and then Mythos goes back, and Silas is like, all right, time to die, Cassandra, and like opens her cage, and then Mythos is like, I challenge you, and Silas is like, yeah, boy. And so they start fighting, so we get a duel fight, and Silas fights with an axe, so it's pretty cool. So we get Mythos and Silas fighting, and Kronos and Duncan fighting, and it goes back and forth to them fighting. Eventually they'll end up in like like the same place, like on opposite sides of this like sewer system kind of situation. And then Mythos and Duncan both kill their respective partners. And then there's like the quickening happening, and then there's like some crazy laser quickening that like combines between the two of them, or it's like this crazy looking like swirly post thing. And then Mythos is like crying because, you know, he actually likes Silas. We liked all of them because they were like his friends from like back in the day. But Silas he like really liked, and so he's super like sad that he had to kill like his friend. And then Cassandra comes up to like kill Mythos while he's laying there like crying like a little bitch. And Duncan's like, you better not. And she's like, no, I want to. And he's like, nope, you better not. And she's like, fine, I won't. But I'm super upset. And so then she like leaves that whole situation. And then we get a shot later on where Duncan and Mythos are just hanging out at like a graveyard, and then Duncan calls him out and says like, hey, you planned this whole thing to get rid of Kronos. Why didn't you just kill him yourself? And then Mythos tries to explain to like, man, he's like, my brother, I couldn't do it. Something. And so Duncan's like disappointed that he had to like go through all that to kill him and the whole situation. But then he says something about, what was it? There's some commentary that I must have missed something, because he says something about Cassandra, and like these episodes are kind of like, the past takes place during the Bronze Age, and it's kind of hinted that these guys are the reason why there was like a Bronze Age collapse, because they like ended the world. That's like kind of what they're playing with to make it seem like these guys were like a force of nature that just rode around and destroyed civilizations like completely. And so then Duncan makes some comment about Cassandra and what he meant, and then what she meant to him, and the Mythos is like, she was nothing. She was one of like tens of thousands or something of immigrants that were just like around that they destroyed. And that wraps up the episode, which is kind of like it's like sour, sad times. All right, now that we're in France, it's time for some French adventures, or at least like European adventures of some sort. This one stars Richie Ride. Yeah, he's back, and he's in France doing France stuff, I guess. Anyway, he's pretending to, I feel like they're in Monte Carlo, but he's pretending to be a guy named Richard Redstone who's super rich. He like gets a Ferrari on credit from Duncan. And he's going around trying to get with like sexy French babes and whatnot. And he runs into this Lamartin chick. What is her name? Monica. Marina. So he meets up with this Marina girl, and she ends up knocking him out and kidnapping him because she needs his money to pay off like the 200,000 francs. Yep, this is before the European Union ruined everything in Europe. But the 200,000 francs to pay off this Carlo Capiamonte guy who runs a casino, who's like Marilina's like grandfather. Like they have this huge estate. Like it is so beautiful. Like it's like, man, I wish I gave her old money in Europe. Holy cow. Anyway, they got this huge estate. They owe this guy all this money, and he's going to close down on the thing unless they can get the money. But Richie Ryan doesn't actually have the money. But then Duncan's like around because he's around. Like Richie doesn't know he's there. But then Duncan like is getting his car repossessed because he never turned the Ferrari back in. And Richard Redstone used his like thing for credit on that. This episode's delightful. We have a couple episodes here at the end of season where it's like there's a lot of back and forth where it's like very serious, heavy episode, and then just like almost like joke episode, which are they did way more of these joke episodes. They're so good. And then so then Richie tries to intercede, and he's going back and forth with these people, convincing them that he can give them the money and help them out. The Capiamonte, Marina, what's their last name? I just said it like 2 seconds ago. The Lamartins. So then Duncan gets involved with Richie because, why not? And then we get some flashbacks with him, and we find out that this whole thing feels like something that occurred with Duncan in the past, because there's this woman, same thing. He was like dealing with a casino, and this like Capiamonte guy he was like a criminal or something. So he like came in and robbed this casino and like stole the money from like this girl that Duncan was trying to hook up with. And he also stole like a watch from Duncan. And it seems like this happened like 100 years ago in like the 1870s, I think. Anyway, and so these guys have like had a run-in before, and they know each other. And so then Duncan gives Richie the money, and then Richie's gonna go like hook up with this chick and like pay off her debt and everything. And then he goes, and then the guy's like, "No, you're 1 day late, so I will not accept this check. I now own the chateau, and now the chateau is worth like 10 million, and so I will sell it back to you for that." And so then there's like a lot of back and forth about that, and then Duncan goes to confront this guy. I don't think this guy's immortal, so it couldn't have been like 100 years ago. It must have been like a tiny bit ago. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, this guy's not immortal because there's no immortal fighting in this one. But we do get some flashbacks of Duncan doing stuff like much earlier too as well. Anyway, so yeah, so this guy must have robbed them like recently, like in the 60s or 50s or something. Anyway, so there's like they do this whole like scam where Duncan goes to confront this guy to get his watch back and to like shoot him, and Richie just happens to be there, and then they like wrestle, and then the guy like shoots and kills Duncan, and then Richie's like takes the gun away and it's like, "Aha, you're gonna be wanted for murder," and the guy's like, "Oh no, I can't be wanted for murder," and he's like, "How about you give me the chateau back and the casino, and I'll let you out of here and everything's good, and give me that watch." And the guy's like, "Ah," so he like flees to, I don't know, America, who knows. But anyway, so Duncan so then he signs over the chateau and the casino and returns Duncan's watch, who Duncan is supposedly dead. Yeah, because he's not immortal. That's right. And then he takes off, and then they all have like, they're having a party. And then Duncan's like, "Oh yeah, I've been around at this thing or something," or like, "I've been in these old chateaus." And so he ends up finding like a wine cellar, and they find like wine from like 100 years ago or like something, because they used to like seal up these rooms so that the Nazis couldn't get in here because of France and stuff. So there's like a bottle from like the 1920s or something. And then because the wine's so old or something, they can sell it for like a lot of money. It's like the whole thing is like nonsensical and silly, but it was delightful all around. And then episode 14 here gets a lot more serious. It still involves Richie Ryan and Duncan and Richie trying to kind of hook up, but not really. It's more like Duncan trying to like make amends for like previous wrongdoings or something. The episode it involves like this Spanish fighting style called the Spanish Circle, which is this crazy thing. And we get like the final battle is kind of cool because they are literally standing over like the practice circle in the backyard of this douchebag. What's the douchebag name? Consone. And the whole thing's funny because everyone's like super Spanish, and the whole thing's like dealing with like flamenco dancing and flamenco dancers and Spanish stuff and this, but I'm pretty sure they're just like hanging out in France still. Anyway, but the past takes place in Madrid. So Consone is a super douchebag, and his whole thing, well, the episode starts off and there's like flamenco dancing, and then Richie Ryan and Duncan are they're just at a dancing thing, and then Duncan is like, so Duncan like was in love with this Spanish kind of aristocrat lady, like way back in like the 1800s, and they wanted to like be together, but then he couldn't be with her because he's like a savage, right? Even though he's like the son of a clansman, so he's technically a prince. That doesn't matter in like modern sensibilities in like Spain. And so she was going to get married off to this Consone guy, and he was super butthurt about that, but he's immortal. He's like, it is what it is. And Consone is also an immortal. And so then they get married, and then he comes back to like visit at some point, and she's dead. And then we find out that she was killed by Consone. And so Duncan goes to confront him, and then he gets like, I can't remember if they fight or not, but I think they fought, and they don't fight because Duncan would have been killed. Because this guy is like, at some point they were kind of like friends because they were all hanging out trying to get like, with the lady's like father. What was this lady's name? I keep saying her name. I don't know if I wrote it down. Anyway, so that's like encounters a mother and daughter, or Hidalgo is like the family, right? So in the modern era, he runs into the Ana and Luisa Hidalgo, who are still flamenco dancers, sort of. Like the mom was a flamenco dancer, and then like something happened where her husband was killed, and then she was hit by like a car, and so then she couldn't dance anymore, and so she's really putting a lot of pressure on her daughter to dance, and the daughter doesn't want to dance, and then the daughter ends up like, well, it's funny because it's like, so then the daughter is like kind of hooking up with this Consone guy, or she's going to get like engaged and married to him. And the mom doesn't want him to because he's kind of an a-hole. And like, I think there's something with like, she was going to date some guy and it was this guy, right? So this guy is like obsessed with being this family. And he keeps like, he's like, if I can't get the love from them, then I will kill them and I will marry one of the daughters essentially or something. It's some crazy thing. And
And so, and then Duncan gets like involved because he was involved in the past, and the past they were like kind of buddies. Consone was teaching Duncan all about the Spanish circle dance and stuff like that, and then. But then he realizes, it's like Consone was like associated with the death, but he couldn't fight him because of something. I think the lady in the past was called Teresa. Okay. And then Consone's like obsessed with this family and being fighting, being with this family. And at some point, Duncan like realizes and figures out that this guy like killed her in the modern day, killed the father, hurt the mother. And then he essentially tricks the guy into confessing that he did this while the new girl, after they got married already, is like right behind like a door, and she storms out and screams at him and runs off, and the guy like mocks them and is like, whatever, I'll just kill the mom. Or it's like, I'll just wait till she has a daughter, and then I'll kill her, and then I'll marry that daughter, and like I will eventually get this legacy. Like he's got like long-term plans. It's like freaking Crusader Kings over here with this guy. He's like, what are you doing, bro? Anyway, so Duncan's finally like had enough of that. And so they go to fight, and for some reason Duncan's going to fight him like the Spanish circle style, which is like two-handed, like dagger and sword. And they like go to this area and like fight in the circle, and it's cool. But then Duncan eventually wins, even though he's about to get killed, because I guess it seemed like, from what I was watching, he was like YOLO on this like fighting style. Like, I'm just going to do my thing. And so he kills him finally, and then there's a whole thing in it about Richie Ryan being very concerned for him, and Duncan also being very concerned because this guy like taught him how to fight this style, and like he's like a super master at it, and he's been like practicing for hundreds of years, obviously. So, but yeah, so that was cool. And then the women are like free at that point, and their legacy is free, and he goes and tells them, and they're like, oh, so happy, and yada yada yada. That wraps that episode up. The next episode is one of these like super goofy episodes. It's called the Stone of Scone, and it's like it's like a comedy. So it's like it starts off and there's like, oh, there's a story of a young man and a stone, and we go back in time, and it's all like in the past, and there's like no fighting, and it's heavy into like the Stone of Scone, which is something to do with like the Scottish being Scottish like royalty, and how like the British stole it, and how Duncan like got tricked by Fritz Cairn. You remember Fritz Cairn, the long-haired guy who got killed like 2 seasons ago or last season? He was awesome. Super British. But so he gets tricked by Duncan to help him like steal the stone from the Scots, and then he doesn't realize what he's doing, and so then he wants to like right that wrong. And there's a lot of like they duel by playing golf, and Amanda's around, and Amanda's come, and she cheats at golf, and everyone's like, how the heck do you cheat at golf? And the whole thing's just like, there's not much to talk about. It's just like a lot of silly bouncing around through time, nothing in the present, just kind of like they go like, it's like 1700s and then up to like the 1800s and 1900s and back and forth and back and forth, and a lot of it's just like moving the stone around and like stealing the stone and causing problems here, and and how Amanda's like, oh, we're gonna get crown jewels from Scotland, and then she shows up and it's just like a rock, but then like they finally steal it and take it back to Scotland, and there's like, it's like a huge deal. In England there's like a whole BBC thing about it. Everyone's like super angry, and but I mean the episode is just fun, right? So there's a whole thing like stuff during World War II, and then it's like Churchill is around, and like it's just it's so silly. But yeah, it was delightful. That was a very good episode. Nothing of like consequence per se, just the stone, and then just Amanda Fitzcarn and Duncan just having a good time acting together and like playing off each other, and it's a pure delight, pure exceptional delight. The next episode gets all serious again. It involves like Duncan's time as like a Jacobite in the Scottish English Civil War thingy in like the 1700s. Anyway, what happens is, so it starts off, and in Paris in modern day, this Keane guy, Stephen Keane, he's looking for Duncan, and him and Amanda like run into each other, and she's like dancing and flirting, and then he like threatens to kill her unless she helps him find Duncan. And Duncan's like around, and then we spent a lot of time with Duncan dealing with like his guilt and sorrow over the mistakes of his past. And so there was like the Battle of Culloden or whatever, where the Scots got like destroyed, and then the guy who led that, he was like friends with Keane, and Keane was like Keen was like the protector of his family, or like, you know, a close friend and all this stuff. And Duncan, after the Jacobites lost and whatnot, he went on like a killing spree. You know, he viewed it at the time as part of the war and part of the battle still, but the war was like already over. The English had like defeated them and won. So by a lot of people historically and in the show, including Duncan, he kind of views it as just like straight up murder. Like we all have like our dark sides, right? And Mythos pops up in here as well because Amanda's really trying to get Duncan to like not fight this guy or to ignore him or to find a way. And then Duncan's like, no, I just got to fight him. I got to right the wrongs of the past and all this stuff. And he deals a lot with like his guilt and whatnot. And then Amanda tries to talk to Keen, and he doesn't want anything to do with forgiveness. He's like, I swore an oath, and I swore that I would do this thing. And there's a lot of comparisons in the episode because the whole reason Duncan came and murdered that guy's family and got him on this pathway of vengeance or whatever is because he had sworn an oath to like fight for these people and do this stuff and like right wrongs done by the British and whatnot. And so it's like the cyclical effect of things that are going on. And like I said, Amanda brings Mythos in, and then Mythos is like, Duncan's going to do what he's got to do. And then they go back and forth, and then Mythos comes to talk to Duncan. He goes to talk to Keen. There's a lot of talking and people discussing guilt and talking about. Amanda's not even concerned. Like her main concern is not that Duncan's going to lose a fight. Skill-wise, it's that he's going to lose a fight because he feels like guilty. And so he feels like he needs to lose the fight, essentially. Or he's not going to put his whole heart into it. And she obviously doesn't want Duncan to die. And so, yeah. And so Duncan talks a lot with Mythos, and it's interesting contrast because there's the whole thing with Mythos being like death, right? And then like the sword, the horseman of death. And then Duncan having guilt and feeling a lot of regret about the murders that he committed here in the same kind of situation. Anyway, so then finally Duncan goes to fight this guy, and like Amanda pleads with Keen and pleads with him one last time, and then Duncan goes to just beats the shit out of him, but he doesn't kill him. He's like, hey man, battle's over, like you lost, like just move on with your life, stop doing stuff, whatever. And then he comes over, and then Amanda and Mythos are like, oh my gosh, I thought you were gonna lose. And he's like, what? Why do you think I lose this battle? thanks for the like, what is it, the vote of confidence or whatever. And then Mythos talks about how like there are no like heroes or villains, it's just people doing stuff. And so it's pretty good, right? It's a lot more deep and trying to be more serious and stuff, which is not as fun, but still a pretty good episode, obviously. So for the penultimate episode of season 5 here, we dive into some like a lot of historical kind of stuff. So the main antagonist immortal in this one is Lord Byron. Lord Byron is a famous poet from like 1800s, I want to say, like the early 1800s. It also has Mary Shelley, like the lady who wrote Frankenstein, and not that she's an immortal, but she's like around and inspired by stuff that happens with like the quickening, obviously, right? That makes like the writers really were like, wait a second, you know what? It's exactly like that. Like, you know, lightning infuses somebody after they supposedly die, and then they like wake up, and it's like, what? Anyway, so Lord Byron became an immortal in like early 1800s. And Mythos found him. So Mythos started mentoring him and stuff. But he is like a total hedonist and just kind of an a-hole all around. And so while like partying and doing drugs and writing poetry and being like the whole series, or the whole episode, is really focused around Mythos trying to defend Lord Byron as like one of the greatest geniuses that's ever existed. But he has no restraints, right? Which kind of makes him, which like fuels his geniusness, but also makes him just like a horrible monster. Like we see at the beginning, he's like a heavy metal rock star in like the 90s, the modern era, but he like kills somebody. He just like takes them up to a building, and they both like leap off to their death, and then he obviously gets up because he's immortal, and he's like, haha. So we see that he just has a total lack of morals or anything when it comes to interacting with human beings or even like immortals, because back in the day they were having like this, I don't know, drug orgy or whatever, and then he ends up like sleeping with another immortal's wife, and then this guy is like, I demand recompense, or I demand justice or something. And so then they fight, and Lord Byron ends up beating him, even though he's never like fought in a sword fight before. And then he's like, it fuels his like insanity even like more. He's kind of like a Tremere, I think that's what they're called in the vampire book, Vampire the Masquerade. Tremere, something like that. Or he's just, I'm Malkavian. He's not that crazy though, to be fair. Anyway,
So in the modern era, how this all gets like pulled in is that he runs into Mike. Who's Mike, you may say? Mike is a man for this episode, in this episode alone. He is a guy who plays guitar with Joe in like their little blues band that he's putting together. But then Mike gets swayed because he meets this Byron guy, and Byron wants to like take him and mold him into like, I don't know, something. He sees something in him, and then Joe's like warning him, and Duncan's warning him, and then Mythos is like around being like, oh no, maybe it'll help, whatever. And you know, then we see that he has like no care for Mike, and he kills him with drugs, I want to say. And so then Joe's like super butthurt about the whole situation, and he like demands that someone do something about this guy who has no care for like mortals, and he just does whatever he wants, and he's very YOLO about the whole situation. And Duncan is like, yeah, I think so. And then him and Mythos go back and forth about the whole genius thing. And even though Mythos tried to help him in the past, and the guy like kind of didn't backstab him per se, but just kind of blew him off and did whatever he wanted, he still feels a little bit of like tug on like wanting to protect and help this guy that he kind of fostered as like a young immortal. So there's bits and pieces about that as well. I definitely want to get off on this exit right here. So there's a whole thing with that. And then, okay, no, I said about that. Yep, so that's the episode. So then Duncan goes and fights him and kills him. Oh, so I forgot. So back in the past, when this guy's fighting Kessler or whatever the guy's was, and he beats him, it looks like he got stabbed, and then he ends up taking his head. And so he's like dead, and Mary Shelley's like watching this, but then the quickening happens, and it like electrifies him, and he gets back up, and that's where she gets inspired to like write Frankenstein the way she wrote it, right? So there you go. So after Duncan kills him in the modern era, you know, everything's, you know, Mythos is kind of sad eponymous about it, and they just like have another conversation about the whole situation and whatnot, which wraps up that episode and leads us into the final episode of season 5. Oh man, this episode's crazy. So we start off with Duncan. We start off with this guy telling somebody that like the dark evil from like 1,000 years ago is showing up, and it happens every 1,000 years or something, and that he has to go warn somebody, and it's going to be all dark and dank and terrible and whatnot. And then after the credits, we get Richie and Duncan. They are leading the opera, and Richie's like, I don't get the opera. There's so many like crazy things going on. Why don't you watch this show about a guy who's just like in love and stuff? And Duncan's like, man, that's the whole point, brother. You gotta like enjoy, or you know, it's timeless and something. And they like laugh and joke about that, and it's like, oh man, this episode. But bruv. So from there, we this guy like rolls on up, and it's the guy from the intro, and he's like, oh, you're Duncan MacLeod, the dark evil is coming for you, you have to fight it, you have to do something. And then we see James fucking Horton. That's right, that motherfucker's back. Or is he? Duncan sees him, Richie doesn't see him, and he's like, I must go fight him. And so he wanders over there, and Duncan's having like a lot of issues this episode with like reality, and that's because there's this dark evil force. I don't think we get a name for it here. I vaguely remember what it is. It's like Araman or something. I can't remember if they say it here or not. Partially because this guy, we come to find out, is so Duncan goes to like confront Horton, and then he like disappears and is like mocking him and laughing at him and stuff. And then what happens is Richie comes up and is like, hey man, there's no one here, like what are you seeing, like what's going on? And then Duncan's like, no, he was there, it's Horton. And it's like, no man, you killed Horton, like he's dead. And then they go back to find the crazy guy, like knew Duncan somehow and was like screaming at him about crazy nonsense. And Duncan's like, hey, they find him, and he's been like strangled to death, and it's like, what? And then so the next day they go to like the morgue or the Paris place where like, because Horton was killed here in Paris, so they go to like where he supposedly was like interred or whatever, and they ask the Parisian guys about it, and they're like, oh yeah, he was buried here. It's like, is he here right now? And he's like, well no, he was moved. And it's like, what? And it's like, yeah, recently. And it's like, who moved him? And it's like, oh, you know, somebody, blah blah blah. And it's like, is it Joe Dawson? Does he look like this with a thing? And it's like, yeah, it was him. And so then Duncan like freaks out about like everything that's going on and being paranoid and stuff, and so he runs over, he meets up with Joe at the airport, and Richie, who's got like the corpse of Horton in like a box with like a skeleton, and Duncan like tears off the top of it, and he's like, what are you doing? And Joe's like, it's none of your business. And it's like, oh my gosh, the drama in the show sometimes is like, just tell him. But we and then Duncan's like freaking out, and then the police want to like press charges or do something, and we come to find out that the niece of Joe, the daughter
of Horton wants to bring his body back from Paris to like America or whatever. And so Joe's like, yeah, that's no problem. We can do that. And that's what's going on with that. But it's like, it is none of Duncan's business. And he's freaking out because he's seeing Jay. He's like, no, he's dead. What are you talking about? And then he starts seeing like other people like Kronos and stuff. And he's like talking to Mythos and Joe about this 1,000-year-old thing. And he has like a memory. And then Richie's like buying into it because he's like, hey man, didn't Cassandra like that crazy witch at the beginning of this like tell you all this stuff? And isn't there like magic and shit in like Immortals, like that guy who could like compel people with like the Jedi mind trick, and she could see the future? And then there's a guy who could like transform into things that Connor fought. Like we really haven't addressed in this show at all, right? And like I said, this show is like starting to get more supernatural. It doesn't like get into it too well. This episode gets into it pretty intensely anyway. And then Duncan's able to track down the lady who's the daughter of the guy who like died, who they're just like, oh no, he just like died of natural causes. He's like, no, I saw the strangulation mark, something. Anyway, so she's telling him that she's like recognizes him because this guy's he wrote a book and he believed everything about like the evil and good and the battle between good and evil, and how there's going to be somebody in 1,000 years and they're going to have to come and fight this guy, and if not, it's going to be like the end of the world or something. And then like later, they find like her house has been burned down and she was killed. And, and then like Mythos and Joe are like, Duncan's having like a real hard time struggling with like hallucinations and stuff. Like maybe he did it. And Richie's like, no, it's impossible. Why would you believe Duncan could possibly do such a thing? It's like, well, man, he's struggling. And then Duncan like sees her in his like apartment trying to have sex with him. And he's like, who are you? And then he like, pulls a sword on her. She's like, oh, do it. And then we can have sex. And then like he sees Horton again and he's like losing his mind. And and like Richie is like finding stuff and all this. And then at some point, Mythos and Joe try to stage like an intervention on Duncan. He's like, no, I don't need an intervention. This is real. Like, I don't know what you guys are doing, blah, blah, blah. And then they get a message from Richie and he's like, oh, hey, I saw Horton and that girl and I'm going to chase him down into this warehouse. And Duncan's like, no. And so he races over there. And when he gets there, he starts seeing tons of stuff and he sees Horton, he sees Kronos like taunting him and stuff. And so he starts fighting with like the evil force. And then right when he like kills the evil spirit or whatever, we find out that it's actually Richie he's been fighting this whole time, and he killed Richie. Like, what? Oh my gosh. And he is like devastated. Right at that point, Joe and Mythos roll up, and then Joe's like, what have you done? And then Duncan's like, he's like on the ground and he's holding his sword up for Mythos to like cut his head off. And Mythos is like, hell no. And so Duncan just like throws his sword or drops it or something. And he just like wanders off. And then Joe's like crying and Mythos comforts and holds him because that's the end of Richie forever. Bro, what a way to end a fucking season. Like, holy shit. Right. And then again, it's like, we know there's like something there. There's some evil spirit that's causing problems, and so that we're gonna pick up in 2 weeks in season 6 and see where that goes. But holy shit, that was crazy. I don't think I've ever seen this. Like, that was like, oh wow, I didn't know how Richie like ended up not being in this show anymore. Like, holy cow, that was wild, crazy stuff. So I'll miss him. I always liked Richie. He's a good character, and they really like played up him in these last few the second half of this season. So yep, there you go. So go ahead. That's season 5 Highlander. Fucking awesome. Generally. There's like 1 or 2 down episodes, but for 18, that's pretty good. So I will go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.